I'll go back to your lecture, and you talked about compassion of recognition, compassion of understanding, compassion of truth. Find it in ourselves first. So
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a very difficult one.
Yeah.
We're approaching October 7th. We are approaching October 7th,
Yeah.
when the horrible massacre happened in Israel,
Yeah.
where young children were murdered, burned, babies in ovens.
That didn't happen. There were no babies in ovens.
Oh yes, they were.
No, there weren't. That's been refuted even by the Israelis.
There were.
No, there weren't.
There were.
There were no babies in ovens.
Well,
But let's agree, but hold on. Let's agree on what we do agree on, okay? A horrible massacre happened. People were killed in their homes. Civilians, hold on a second.
Killed, were raped.
Stay with, no. Look, let's agree that was bad enough without adding stuff to it, okay? Now, I'm telling you, there's been no evidence of mass deliberate rapes. No such evidence.
Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry, there's no such evidence.
Oh yes, of course there was.
No, there isn't.
There
No,
was
I'm
a
sorry.
woman in the United Nations that came to Israel and did the research and brought those evidence to the United Nations.
I'll let you finish your question.
My
Okay?
question
No,
is, how
go
do
ahead.
I find compassion for these people?
Which people?
The animals that did that.
The animals that did that. I get your point of view, okay? In your point of view, everything you read actually happened the way you've read it. Hold on a second. I'm telling you what I understand your point of view to is. There was mass rapes, children beheaded, put into ovens, so on. Okay, now, objectively, I'm telling you, I looked at all the evidence I could. There were horrible massacres. Let's agree on that, okay? There were hostages, including young children and elderly people, civilians that should never have been captured, that were taken into captivity. Let's agree on that, okay? On the specific issues of babies in ovens and mass rapes, you and I are not going to agree, because I looked at evidence that you haven't looked at. But hold on a second. Let's just agree on what we do agree on, okay? And then let's take your question. How do we have compassion for these animals? Well, I'm not going to get into a big political rant here, but I'll tell you what I think very quickly, okay? If I saw the world from the perspective that you see the world from, I would 100% agree with you. But that's not how I see the world. That's not how I see the world. Number one. Number two, I've been to Palestine. 2.5 years ago, I went there to work with Palestinian women who've been tortured in Israeli jails, which has been documented by Israeli Physicians for Human Rights, by B'Tselem, the Israeli human rights organization, by United Nations and others. Nobody ever talks about the thousands of Palestinians. Did you know that 2 Palestinian doctors were tortured to death recently by Israel? Doctors tortured to death. Now my question to you is, and I'm not going to go into the history, this is not the place for it, but I have a different view of the history. I used to see it the way you do. I don't anymore. I'm not gonna go into how I do see the history, because this is not the. Just let me finish. Honest to God, I'll give you the last word. I promise you. I do promise to give it. Okay. History did not begin on October the 7th. And here's what I know. Most of my fellow Jews. Now in Canada, you know, I mentioned the residential schools. In Canada, 4 years ago, there was a poll, a national poll. Now thousands of children died in those schools. People were tortured, raped, all kinds of stuff. Not even controversial. There was a poll in Canada. 70% of Canadians 4 years ago said they knew nothing or little about the residential schools. 70% of Canadians knew nothing or little about the residential schools. So what happened to indigenous people? If you do a poll in the United States based on all the Hollywood movies that people have seen, until very few years ago and even now, most people will know nothing about what happened to the indigenous people here. Nothing. The genocide, the torture, the rape, the starvation. They know nothing about it. And in some states in the United States, it's illegal to even to teach it in the schools. Now, do you think the average Jew knows anything about the indigenous people of Palestine? No, just a second. So, these animals that you talk about, the first massacre of Palestinians in Gaza didn't happen last year. Didn't even happen 4 or 5 years ago when they killed hundreds of children with their bombs. It happened in 1956. But just let me just a second. In 1956, they massacred 200 civilians. Do you know about it? Do you know about it? You've never heard of it. Of course you haven't heard of it. That's why you can call them animals. Otherwise, you'd see them like human beings like the rest of us. Anyway, I'm done. Go ahead. Yeah.
So human beings can murder and rape and maim and cut breasts of women, that's okay?
No, it's not okay.
Well, that's the message you're giving.
Did I say it was okay?
That's the message you're giving. That's the claps
Okay,
I'm hearing.
how many of you heard me say that it's okay to rape and kill people? Raise your hands.
I will finish with one thing.
By the way,
there is a Nova.
By the way, how do you feel about the rapes of Palestinian women by the Israeli army in 1948?
That's a false.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
You know what? You want to believe me? Read the Israeli historians.
Well,
I
we're
can give you
differ
the
in
names.
our opinions. I lived it.
No, I can give you.
I lived it. I lived in Ashkelon.
I can give you the names
Let
of the.
me tell you one thing. In the United States, we teach kids, I'm sorry, you will let me finish. In the United States, we teach kids how to be in fire alarm.
Okay, I'm done. This is what happens, people, is you and I don't live in the same world. But let me tell you one thing. This is not about you and I, okay? There was a Jewish survivor of the Holocaust called Edith Egger. Have you ever heard of her? Okay, she's a therapist here in California. She was on the same train to Auschwitz as my grandparents.
My father is
Okay, okay, I'm telling you something now, okay? I'm not debating with you anymore. You and I don't live in the same world. We don't. You're a good person, good heart. We don't live in the same world. Just let me finish. Edith was on the same train to Auschwitz as my grandparents. Her parents were on the same train. My grandparents didn't survive. Her parents didn't survive either. She did. And at some point in her book called The Choice, which is worth reading, she goes back to Berghof, I think, which is Hitler's lair in the Bavarian Alps. And she goes back there to forgive Hitler. Okay? And she says, not because it's okay what Hitler did, but because I didn't want to keep him imprisoned in my heart anymore. So I'm not here to preach forgiveness, but I'm telling you, that place where we call other people animals, if you want to live there, that's your choice. I don't want to live there. I want to understand people. I want to understand what happened to them. I want to know why they behave the way they behave. I'm not into justifying taking civilian hostages. I said that was unjustifiable. Why you didn't hear me, I don't know. I said there were massacres that shouldn't have happened. Why you didn't hear me, I don't know. You know why you didn't hear me? Because you live in a bubble, that's why. Anyway. All right. Other questions?
Over here, Gabor.
Anybody, by the way, wants to know about my visit to the occupied territories, there's a film online you can watch called Where the Olive Trees Weep. Watch it.
Gabor.
Over here.
Gabor. I'm over here. Over on this side.
Sorry, where are we? Yeah.
I'm here.
Hi, Amy.
Hi. Being a healer.
Let me just say, this is difficult. This is really difficult. It's difficult because this debate has been going on in the Jewish community for over 100 years now. Not that you know that, but it has been going on for 100 years. It's going on especially right now. And you can see how, whether I'm right, whether my friend here is right, whether neither of us are right, just how big the feelings are. And it's even for people of goodwill like you and I know you respect me. You wouldn't be here otherwise, you know? It's so difficult to communicate. It's so difficult.
All right, let's take a deep breath here. Seriously, this is a lot to process. And these are some of the most challenging issues of our time. We're talking about deeply rooted pain and trauma, historical and ongoing, between Israel and Palestine. Gabormate brings up an incredibly complex perspective that isn't just about who's right or wrong, but about understanding on a human level why people do what they do, even in the most extreme situations. Now, let's not rush to conclusions here. A lot of what's said here is hard to hear and might go against what some of us have come to believe. Mate's approach, for example, emphasizes compassion, even for people who've committed violent acts, like he mentioned about a Holocaust survivor who returned to forgive Hitler. And it's not about excusing the atrocities. It's about releasing the burden of hate and trying to understand, in some sense, how things got to this point. There's this idea he talks about of stepping out of the bubble of just seeing good guys and bad guys. He doesn't ignore the terrible acts that have happened on either side. He's looking at the cycle of trauma and violence that feeds off itself, creating more suffering over time. And that's tough because it asks us to consider compassion where it feels impossible. And hey, it's understandable if this stirs up emotions. Wars have left families devastated on both sides, and anger is real. But Mate's goal is more about trying to break the cycle so that maybe, just maybe, we can find a way toward understanding, or at least toward something different than what's always been. It's heavy stuff, and it's okay if we don't all feel the same way about it. But yeah, part 1 digs deeper into this with Mate tackling more of these big, difficult questions. If you're up for it, the link is right there at the top. All right, let's pause for a second. I get it, this whole compassion thing feels almost impossible, especially if you're someone who's been directly affected, or even if you just feel deeply for those who have. But maybe for a moment, let's try to set aside our personal reactions and take a step back. Sometimes our pain or horror over these incidents blinds us to the bigger picture. It's not about excusing what's happened or pointing fingers. It's about seeing both sides of the story to understand what led here. Because if we rush to judge or label, we can miss the complexity of the human experience that sits underneath all the pain and violence. And Mate's invitation is just that, to see the whole picture. He's challenging us to look beyond labels and see the roots of suffering, in hopes that maybe we'll get closer to some kind of healing, or at the very least, to a clear understanding. And yeah, it's a tough perspective, no question. But if you're ready, part 1 gets even deeper into these questions. Click the link at the top to check it out.
Anyway, Amy, yeah.
Being a healer in a traumatized world.
Yeah.
For me, that has shown up as I am still doing my own work.
Yeah.
I'm still in my own expansion. There's still waves that hit me
Yeah.
and that I have to ride. So as I work with patients or clients or course members, whoever I'm working with, how have you found that balance between me sharing what I'm going through and to be authentic versus just holding that space for them and not sharing anything of my own?
Well, the question of sharing is a vexatious one, because on the one hand, we're always told not to share about ourselves, that it's unprofessional, which I think is nonsense. But there's appropriate sharing, there's inappropriate sharing. Okay? Now, it's always a question of why am I sharing? If I'm sharing because I want sympathy, then I'm using the client. If I'm sharing because I want to look like a good guy, I'm using the client. And the client's in my office in the first place because they were used sometime or another. But if I'm sharing because I want them to see that in our essential humanity we're not different, then that's liberating for people. So I don't have an issue with sharing as long as it's come from a place of, I get it because I've had the same experience. Not, oh, poor me, please help me. Or look how honest I am, you know. No, just, I get it. That's your experience, that's my experience as well. So that's where the sharing comes from. That I think is healthy. Yeah, another question?
Yeah, we're going to take one from the web here. Cassandra wants to know, why all these mind-body connections, do you think, why are they medically ignored?
What, say that again?
Why are all these mind-body connections, these proven things, medically ignored?
Why are they ignored in the medical schools? Well, there's, you know what, I'm not going to answer that question. And the reason I won't, it's therapeutically not helpful. Okay, it's not going to help anybody if I gave you my theory. Lots of reasons. The influence of money, the pharmaceutical companies, the traumatization of doctors themselves, how they're uncomfortable. You know, I mean, you know, how do you build a cult? You know how you build a cult? You give them a uniform, a special jargon, you sleep deprive them, you subject them to authority and leaders, you send them to medical school, you know. A lot of doctors are very traumatized. If you measure the biological variables, I'm not going to go into details, of doctors in training, they age faster than other people their age. So in order to look at trauma, people have to look at their own. They don't want to do that. There's all kinds of reasons. But you know what? It's not helpful for me to go into that, and maybe it wasn't that helpful to engage in discussion either, but there it was. Anyway, carry on.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hi, Gabriel. Hi, everybody. My name is Pamela Hawkins, and just felt like me lighten the load and validate some of that Gabriel was talking about. You remember the video they showed of the young man that was in jail and his story of drug use and so forth. And but we are hardwired to heal. Myself, I am one, as a health professional, never taking movement for granted. I talk about my story of resilience and my fight with debilitating disease and winning with MS. Never taking, someone that had impeccable nutrition and as a scientist and researcher, I said, what I felt like when I heard MS, like a predator was lurking around ready to ambush me. But I said no. When my immune system, this system that's designed to protect me, to keep track, keeps a score of germs, I said no. I had to look back. Getting to the root was where the healing began, and it took me on a journey going backwards to, being trapped in a house fire. And having Bell's palsy as a sophomore at University of Florida, and I was like, but I forgot about me in that suppressing healthy anger. You know, there are some things I needed to get angry back and say, no, that wasn't all right. So I just thought I wanted to show, and we fight for ourselves. So I have his books. I have When the Body Says No. So I encourage everyone in this room, when the body says no, whether it's a cold, COVID, or cancer, don't just take the status quo and say, I'm accept that diagnosis, but say, why my body, why in me, and what do I need to learn about me to be whole, healing and whole, and find your way back to wellness. So,
okay, thank you. When I was writing When the Body Says No, and by the way, we're going to do an exercise now, but before we take more questions, we're going to do an exercise. Oh, stop it. John, listen to me. Before we do take more questions, we're going to do an exercise. Okay? But when I was writing When the Body Says No, I hadn't done the research yet. So I was phoned by a support group for people with MS, multiple sclerosis. And they said, we heard you're working on a book on stress and health. Would you come and talk to us and tell us your theories? And I said, yeah, I will. So I went, and I began with an apology. I said, look, I'm so sorry. I have no idea if what I'm saying is true. I've done no research. I'm just giving you my impressions. So if I insult you in any way at all, please forgive me. But here's what I think. And then I told them that people who develop MS are people who are very nice. They have trouble saying no. They suppress healthy anger, etc., etc. When I finished the talk, they all said, you just described our lives. And I said, great. Are some of you willing to be interviewed for the book? So 23 of them out of 25 put their hands up. They couldn't say no, you know. And there was a woman there. There was a woman there who says, I can't even say the word. Now, think about that one, because if you're parents, if you're a parent, what does your kid start saying at 1.5, quite spontaneously? No. That's nature's wisdom. Because nature says, you need a barrier behind which you can develop your yes. If you don't know how to say no, your yeses don't mean a thing. So you better say no automatically. So that's what, and parents call that the terrible twos. I mean, that's nothing terrible about it, totally natural. A friend of mine, Ben was a doctor, and Harold was a doctor. Ben was his 2.5-year-old child, and Harold said to Ben one day, Ben, do you want an apple? And Ben said, no, I want an apple. It's the will asserting itself. Now, there's one woman there, and she said, I can't say no. I said, okay, good. Give me $100 right now. She said, I don't have $100. I said, that's okay. After the meeting, we can go to the ATM machine and get the... She said, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. I said, I'm just trying to get you to say no to a ridiculous demand from a perfect stranger to whom you owe nothing whatsoever. She said, I can't do it. So we're going to do an exercise now, okay? I'm going to ask each of you very quickly to find a partner, okay? All right, everybody's got a partner. Here's what's going to happen. I'm just going to give this 3 minutes each, okay? You're going to put a question to each other, and when the first partner puts the question to the second partner, the person who asked the question just shuts up. They just listen. You're not there to support or to validate or to empathize or to disagree with. You're just there to really get what your partner's saying. At the end of 3 minutes, and that's all we have time for, usually I make it longer, I'm going to say stop, switch, in which case now turn it around, and then the second partner will put the same question to the first partner. And then the second partner now just listens. With no agenda. Your only agenda is to really get what your partner is saying. Here's a question. Tell me where in your life you have difficulty saying no. All right, that's the question. Now this shows up, I'll repeat the question again. Tell me where in your life you have difficulty saying no. Now, this shows up usually in two major areas: personal relationships, spouses, friends, adult kids, parents, or in work. So whatever you identify your difficulty saying no, and here's what I mean, but there's a no that wants to be said. Like when I say to this woman, give me $100, she doesn't want to give me $100. So but there's a no that wants to be said, and you're not saying it. Okay? Clear? All right? Please start.
So yeah, Gabor's exercise, honestly, it's a pretty big deal if you're the type who finds it hard to say no in certain situations. I know I struggled with it myself. For the longest time, saying no felt like setting off a bomb, especially with my ex-husband. He'd just bulldoze right over me, and I'd keep quiet, feeling like I had to go along to avoid making things worse. But yeah, that didn't work out too well. It took a massive breakdown, a full-on relapse, to finally get me into counseling and figure out how to put my foot down. And let me tell you, finally saying no felt like flipping the switch on years of pent-up stress and pressure. I could feel my body, my mind, everything just lightening up. Since then, every time something comes up that feels like it's going to hurt me or drag me down, I can say no without feeling guilty. It's been life-changing, honestly, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. 20 years now, and I'm still sticking to it. Now, this exercise Gabor suggests, it's not just about finding a voice. It's about peeling back what's really holding you back from saying no. Why can't we say it? And once we know that, it's like suddenly there's this door we can walk through. So yeah, give it a shot. Grab a friend, or even just take some time for yourself and think it through. Where in your life do you feel stuck saying yes when you really, really want to say no? It's raw and uncomfortable, for sure. But think of it this way. Sometimes that simple word can change everything. Just ask yourself, where do you struggle to say no? Let yourself sit with it, and let that be a starting point for something new. And please comment below if you've been able to say no to anything painful recently, or if you're just working up the courage to say it. Drop a line too. Would love to hear how it's going for you.
This is part of an exercise that is in the myth of normal, but I can give you the other parts very simply. I've been told that this exercise alone, by the way, before I go on, I need to say something. I apologize to you. Okay? You're asking a question, and I allowed myself to get triggered and get into an argument with you. So I apologize to all of you. It's an example. It's an issue I lived with all my life. I used to believe as this lady does. I don't anymore. But I have tremendously strong feelings about it. No, excuse me. Let me just talk now. Okay, now. All I'm saying is, the proper response to your question would have been, I understand where you're coming from, but this is not the place for me to address that issue. That's what I should have said. Okay? And nothing you said explains my own emotional reaction. That's totally my own responsibility. Okay? All right. Now, this exercise, in terms of when you don't say no, that's the first part. You can do it once a week. Where this week did I not say no? Where there's a no that wanted to be said and I didn't say it? Just write it down. Second question. What is the impact of my not saying no? So if you actually look at the impact, fatigue, sleeplessness, resentment, worse, all kinds of physical symptoms. What's the impact? Self-criticism, shame. That's the impact. The third question is, what is the belief behind my inability to say no? If I say no, then they won't like me. Remember what I said about attachment versus authenticity? They won't like me. Or if I say no, I'm selfish. If I say no, I'm letting down my responsibilities. That's important, because once you look at the belief, you can actually question it. Is it really true? Does me saying no actually make me selfish? If I've been working all night and you call me up to have a cup of coffee in the morning with you, and I said no, am I really being selfish if I say no to you? So that's the third question. Fourth question is, where did I learn that belief? Well, you know where you learned it. You learned it in childhood. Fifth question is, who would I be if I didn't believe that? If I didn't believe that if I say no, that makes me a bad person, who would I be? And the last question is, where am I not saying yes? Where is there yes in my life that I want to express, that I want to manifest, I want to live, but I'm not doing it because I'm too busy not saying no to all the other stuff. So those two little words, yes and no, make all the difference in your life. That's just a little exercise you can do or teach your clients if you want to. It really does change things very quickly. All right, questions? John, if you run the mic around.
Yeah. Let's take one from you.
As a social worker, I'm curious about ways to change our system, and I feel like you probably have a lot more experience with this than me. How would we start to advocate for this to be taught to physicians on that level, for like, call it for PhD level, or how would we advocate for change within our system?
Well, look, so first of all, the change is happening. I mean, Harvard University now has this little mind-body institute, you know? That's good. Harvard University should be a mind-body institute, but at least they have something. More and more doctors are reaching out beyond traditional medicine to functional medicine, integrated medicine, and all this. These conferences that people are coming at to hear about trauma from people like Amy and Nadine and Bessel and myself and others, this wouldn't have happened 10, 15 years ago. This itself is a sign of change. So I don't beat my head against walls trying to convince people of anything. I just think we should all just speak our truth at whatever platform we have, on whatever issue, whether it be political or personal or therapeutic or professional, and trust that there's a need for this in the world, and the world will respond, which it is. I mean, look, the first time I gave a public talk after my first book got published, 25 years ago now, there were 6 people there, and 2 of them were my childhood friends. So, you know, just keep doing your thing is what I'm saying. But don't worry too much about trying to change institutions. Let natural erosion and evolution do that. Okay? Questions?
So we're going to take one from the web here. Alexandra asks if you can speak to the importance of language in our work, and do you encourage people to use mind-body terminology regularly? Why or why not?
It's not that I encourage people to use any kind of language. It's that I notice what kind of language they use. Because when somebody's talking to you, they're giving you a narrative, which is the thought content, but then there's the words they use to express the thought content. Those words are always meaningful. So if I was working with somebody therapeutically, I'd pay a lot of attention to the language, to their verbal language, also to the tone of their voice. It's quite extraordinary how sometimes, just to give you one example, very mature and confident and competent women can sound like a 5-year-old little girl when they go back to that vulnerable, hurt little self. And then you notice that. You notice that. Let me tell you an amazing story. I had a person once who was diagnosed with what was then called multiple personality disorder. Now it's called dissociative identity disorder. So it was trauma-based. She split herself into all these personalities. One of her personas was that of an 8-year-old little boy. And she had asthma. So I prescribed for her a medication called theophylline. Theophylline is a liquid that you drink that keeps the airways from narrowing. So one day, the 8-year-old boy calls me. He's having tremors and he's got nauseated, he's got diarrhea. These are typical symptoms of theophylline overdose. When this person was in their 8-year-old body, they had the physiology of an 8-year-old. Now, I thought I was seeing things. It's been described in the medical literature. People in different personas will have different EEGs. They'll have different responses to skin stimulation. I'm talking about the mind-body unity, and to go back to this question, a person's voice tells you so much about where they're coming from. So whatever you do, don't just pay attention to people's narrative. You don't get lost in the narrative. Pay much more attention to the language they use, to their body language, to the tone of their voice, and address them. Much more important than just dealing with the narrative. That's my answer to that question. Yeah?
Hi, yes, my question is, to what level do you assert your authenticity as a person who is working to recover that? And how much do you just give an emotionally immature person less access to you if they cannot accept that vulnerability with safety?
Well, wait a minute. So let's start with the first question, okay? Repeat the first question again.
To what level do you assert your authenticity as a person who is recovering authenticity?
To what level do you what?
Assert your own...
Assert your vulnerability. Who wants to know?
Me? I could lie and say my clients, but I want to know.
Okay, you want to know, all right? So you're asking, to what degree do you assert your authenticity?
When surrounded by unsafe people.
Mm-hmm. What do you do?
Well, I've done work on giving those people less access to myself.
Okay.
But I'm curious what your thoughts are on that approach.
Well, look, now partly it's situational. If I had 6 cops with their guns pointed at me, my first priority would not be to assert my authenticity. But barring that extreme situation, you have a decision to make. You can have 2 kinds of pain. The pain of self-suppression and pretense and self-denial, or the pain of not being liked by some other people. Attachment versus authenticity. I can't tell you what to choose. You have to decide. There might not be a pain-free option. And sometimes the best you can do, no, if you can have authenticity and attachment, great. If you have friends who can accept your authentic manifestation and say, oh, great, well, that's good. But if some people in your life can't handle it because they're not ready for it, and that's not what they bought in for when they established a relationship with you, then you have a choice to make. Which pain would I rather have? The pain of self-suppression or the pain of perhaps being rejected? Your call. But there may not be a pain-free option, okay? At least not in the short term.
Thank you.
All right, does that answer it? Thank you.
Okay, one from the web. Tiffany, let me see, okay. Tiffany shares, she says she's on board with most of this for most of her clients.
Yeah.
But the mothers that she's worked with who's lost, or children have died by suicide or homicide,
Yeah.
Trauma plus grief plus injustice entwined, it feels intolerable to them. And she says, who am I to say that it is not?
What feels intolerable to them?
Just the trauma and grief, the enormity of it all, I think, is what she's saying.
It is intolerable. It's too much. It's not what any human beings should have to deal with. But I don't understand the question, because this is what it goes back to what I said. You have to be able to be with people's pain. You have to be able to be with people's pain. I worked with people recently who's lost entire families, and I have to be with their pain. And so what I would say to the questioner is, if you're not able to be with the pain of these mothers who've so tragically lost their beloved children, for whom they would have given their lives if they could have. If you can't be with their pain, then recognize your limitation. Or do the work that'll help you be with their pain and stay compassionate and still believe in life. Maybe you can achieve that stage. If you can, you'll be able to be with the pain of these women. If you can't, you might not be the person to help them. Okay?
This exercise of saying no and setting boundaries, it's huge. And trust me, I know how tough it is when you're someone who's been through the ringer and has that instinct to jump in and help. Sometimes even feeling like you're reliving your own pain to connect with someone else. I've been there and I know the pull. I would get right down on the same level of hurt with people looking for advice, almost like I needed to feel what they were feeling. It felt like the best way to understand them. But I realized that without setting some boundaries for myself, I was getting sucked back into my own struggles, like opening up old wounds. And honestly, learning to balance that has been a game changer. I had to protect myself, keep myself from being pulled down by the very pain I was trying to help them with. It was hard to see where the line was, but now I know my limits. I can support others without putting myself back in harm's way. That doesn't mean I'm any less compassionate, but it means I can actually stay present for them without losing myself. Now, Gabor's exercise here, it's a great way to dig into why you feel you can't say no, or where those boundaries are. Maybe it's something from childhood that taught you that you had to be nice or selfless to be loved. Or maybe it's a belief that saying no makes you selfish. Whatever it is, getting to the root can be powerful. You look at the impact, understand the beliefs behind it, and then most importantly, ask yourself who you would be without that belief holding you back. Yeah, try it out. Really ask yourself, where in your life do you struggle to say no? And where are you saying yes when it's actually not what you want or need? That yes-no balance can change everything. But here's the thing, you have to be able to be with people's pain, really be with it, without letting it break you down. I've worked with people who faced unimaginable losses, losing entire families, and I had to let myself feel their pain to truly support them. But putting yourself on that level, sharing in that depth of suffering, can stir up your own struggles too. I've found that without a strong boundary, you can start to lose yourself in their pain. You need a line, a moment when you know it's enough, to protect yourself, to stay steady. Finding that line is tricky, but it's essential if you want to be there for others while also keeping yourself whole. And hey, please comment below if you managed to say no to something painful recently, or if you're just working up the guts to do it. Would love to hear your experiences. We're all in this together.
Hi, I was wondering if you ever struggle finding the feeling of hope in the work that you do.
And can you just wave your hands?
Right here.
Oh, yeah, okay, hi, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
I was just wondering if you ever struggle with finding the feeling of hope or remaining hopeful doing this work.
I don't deal in hope at all, okay? And you might say I'm hopeless, okay? Because hope is for something to happen in the future. I don't go there. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. When I look at some situations, I just see things getting worse in the short term. That's my best assessment. But I deal in possibility. My question is, what is possible for people? So when I see somebody like Howard, or in another context, when I see people who are supposed to be enemies actually embracing each other and supporting each other, which I've also seen recently, I see human possibility. And that possibility is in the present moment. So I just believe in possibility. I believe in human possibility. And if I didn't, we all do. You all believe in possibility. You all believe it's possible for people to transform, to learn, to change, to let go of hatred, to let go of judgment, to find a common humanity with each other, to find their own humanity. That's not a hope of something happening in the future. That's a possibility that exists in the present moment. So it's that possibility that keeps me going, not any hope for the future.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi.
Amazing. Hi. So this morning, you shared something that really resonated with me. You mentioned how you wet the bed until you're about age 13, and that just, again, I could relate a lot to that, and I was just wondering, it's something that kind of filled me with deep, deep shame, and I really just disconnected completely from my body for years. And
shame, you said?
Shame, yeah.
Are you willing to come up here?
Oh boy, sure. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, what's your name?
Emily.
Nice to meet you. Hi.
Nice to meet you.
So you were talking about shame. What about shame?
Yes, so I'm wondering if you had similar feelings with shame with that, just the loss of sensation over your body and just it being such a vulnerable thing to happen to you and for it to be happening later in life, later than normal. And I never connected it to a...
Slow down a sec.
Yeah, I'm nervous.
Okay. What are you experiencing right now?
Activation.
Yeah, what else?
Sweating.
Okay.
Nervousness.
Okay. All right.
Hot.
What about in your body, in your chest?
My heart is beating very, very fast. My shoulders are up here.
Okay. Is there some fear for you?
Yes.
What's the fear?
The fear is that I'm going to embarrass myself or stutter.
And embarrass yourself meaning what?
Sharing something too vulnerable or that I think isn't going to be beneficial for others and only beneficial for me.
Okay, so there's a couple of things here, okay? First of all, if in this room of I don't know how many hundred people, you saw somebody else come up on stage and share as you have shared, what would you think of them?
That they were really brave.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So do you notice then that you look on other people with more compassion than you look at yourself? Okay? You notice that? And that's a constant theme. People have a lot more compassion in general for others than they do for themselves. Okay? Now there's a reason for that. Okay? How are you feeling at the moment? Yeah, what's going on?
Conflicted.
Sorry?
I'm feeling conflicted.
Which means?
I'm feeling multiple things. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what I'm feeling.
Just physically.
Relief.
Okay.
And awe.
Yeah.
Gabormate.
I can totally understand that. Okay. No. The relief is about what? What's the relief about?
The relief is that I'm not alone.
No, you're not.
Even if I'm the only person in this room other than you, who wet the bed when they were 13,
Yeah.
I'm not alone in the shame, it feels like.
Yeah, okay. So tell me about, what do you feel ashamed about? What's the self-accusation?
That I was different, that there was something wrong with me. I couldn't do the thing.
So there's an assumption there. Maybe you were different, right? But that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. Is it possible to be different without there being something wrong?
Yeah.
So let's not mix the two up. How many of you have felt different growing up than other people around you? Look around all these different people. You know why? Because it's the sensitive people who feel different. And they see things and experience things differently than other people. Then they're made wrong for it. And you're still buying into it. But can you see how it might be a gift to be different?
Yes.
Tell me the gifts.
The gifts of being different?
Yeah.
Well, being able to see different perspectives, that's
Exactly.
how change happens.
Exactly.
Art, creativity, it's all built in differences.
Exactly. So you're different, but does that make you worse?
No.
Not necessarily, yeah. Now, the shame. Basically, shame says, I want to sink into the ground, I don't even want to be here, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what kids feel when they're not accepted. Because the child's got two things the child can believe, okay? One is, this world is cruel, it can't understand me, it's hopeless, these adults are stupid. Okay, the child can believe that. Or the child can believe, oh, there's something wrong with me. And maybe if I work hard enough, I can fix it.
Yep.
Now, which belief do you think is more acceptable to the child?
The latter.
The latter one. So even that shame came along to help you. Do you see that?
Yeah.
But if you ask yourself, how old is that shame? I mean, what age would you put on it?
1.
All right. Now, if you could talk to that 1-year-old now, Emily, if you could talk to the 1-year-old Emily from your adult self, what would you want to say to her?
Is it too cliche to say that it's going to be okay and that there's nothing wrong with you?
Yeah. And you would hold her, right?
Yeah, I would hold her.
Hold her now.
Thank you.
You got her? You think you have her?
Yeah, I have her.
Good. Next time the shame arises, just hold her. Okay?
Thank you.
Is that clear? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, take care.
Thank you.
All right, let's have another question. I'll come back here a little bit. We got to pay attention to the back of the room. Sorry, folks. It's hard to pick. Okay.
Thank you. I first want to say thank you as an Indigenous woman from Alaska. In Vancouver is where my people are from, the Tsimshian people. Thank you. My question is, as a healer who has experienced the effects of historical trauma on our people, I am working boots on the ground with adolescents that are also experiencing the impacts. What advice would you give to, I guess, someone like me?
Well, what advice do you need?
I think where I struggle the most is feeling like I hit a wall.
Like what?
Like I hit a wall because I work with adolescents who come from two different sources.
Yeah.
One source is the juvenile justice system.
Yeah.
And the other source is the tribal health clinic that I work for.
Yeah.
So they're either coming with behaviors that are they're either coming with emotional trauma that is like imploding inside and they feel suicidal and do a lot of self-harm, or it's external and they're harming other people. And I struggle with the ones that are coming from the juvenile justice system because it feels like they're harder to reach.
What is your struggle? Just to help them open up, or?
I think getting past the barrier of the defenses.
Yeah. Well, look, these kids have been beaten up by life since they were born, most of them, as you know. They were born into, as I said earlier, generations of traumatized families. They were imbibing trauma even in the womb, the uterus of their mothers when they were pregnant.
Oh, I know.
Maybe their mothers were even drinking when they were pregnant, some of them. They've had many blows aimed at them, and the juvenile court system just adds to it. It takes a lot to be with these kids. And you can't force them to open up. What you can do as much as you can is to be an empathetic witness, to accept them exactly the way they are, and not need and drop any need that you have for them to open up.
Yeah.
Because as soon as they sense your need for them to open up, so you can feel better about yourself as a therapist, they're going to shut down even more. So I'd say that the most important work you can do here, this is a very facile and very quick answer to a very complex question, but the best thing you can do for them is to really work on yourself so that you're not uncomfortable with their discomfort, so that you're not uncomfortable with their defenses, so that you need nothing from them. And I think that gives you the best chance of being the person for them in whose presence they feel safe enough to open up. That's what you can do. and you're going to fail many times, and you're going to have to accept the failure. But that doesn't mean you haven't done any good, because everybody here can tell you. How many times, just raise your hand if you had this is the last comment I'll be able to make. How many of you had the experience of somebody you don't even recall coming up to you in the street or somewhere and saying, you don't remember me, but something you said to me 20 years ago or 30 years ago, or just the way you spoke to me made such a huge difference in my life. Raise your hand if you had that experience. Well, you're going to have that experience too. But you may not have it next week. Maybe 10 years from now. So just keep doing what you're doing and drop any need for them to be any different.
I think that the need that I have is it feels like an urgency because I have children and I've broken the bond. I do my own work and I feel like it's not enough time. I have these kids for a whole year in
It's not
residential.
enough. Look, the system is inadequate, which is a mild way to put it. They need much more than you can give them in a year even. It's totally true. But as long as you're deciding to do this work, just do what you can while you're with them. And you're right, the system is inadequate. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you all for your attention.
This conversation taps into something crucial. In helping others, we have to balance our presence with our boundaries. Gabor's perspective shows that while it's essential to be with people in their pain, it's equally vital to maintain your own emotional limits. Because the reality is, if we're not careful, that constant exposure to other struggles can start to blur into our own past wounds. One thing I find powerful here is the idea that we don't need to fix someone to make a difference. Just showing up without an agenda, without the need for them to change, is its own form of healing. Often, the real challenge isn't getting someone to open up or even making them feel better right away. It's about creating a safe space that might be the first step toward healing, one that doesn't ask them to be anything other than what they are in that moment. Another piece of this is accepting the limits of what we can do. Sometimes we're given only a brief time with someone, a year, a few months, or just one conversation, and it can feel inadequate, like it's nowhere near enough to see real change. But Gabor's point about letting go of the need for a specific outcome reminds us that the impact of our presence is unpredictable. Sometimes just being a safe presence leaves a mark far beyond what we can immediately see. Ultimately, the strength lies in finding a way to be fully present while understanding we're not responsible for fixing every pain we encounter. It's about offering connection, one that stays open to possibilities without attaching ourselves to the outcome. That balance between empathy and self-protection lets us continue showing up for others while also honoring our own journey. At the end of the day, the work we do, whether it's healing, guiding, or simply being present for someone else, goes beyond immediate results or visible change. It's about planting seeds of understanding, trust, and resilience that may bloom long after we're there to witness it. Each act of compassion, every moment we listen without judgment, creates a ripple effect that might be part of someone's healing even years down the road. So if you're in this kind of work, or even just trying to support someone close to you, remember that being there truly matters. Even if you don't see the outcome, even if it feels small or imperfect, that presence, your presence, has power. Keep showing up with openness and grace. Change, healing, growth, they often come quietly in their own time. And who knows, you might just be the reason someone else finds the strength to keep going. Subscribe, comment, like, and share to Inside Serene, where serenity matters.